All right, everyone, welcome back to Visions for the Future of Higher Ed. I am super lucky today to be joined by Tawnya Means, who is the founder and principal of Inspire Higher Ed. She has previously served as the Assistant Dean and Chief Learning Officer at the University of Illinois, Assistant Dean at the University of Nebraska, and the Director of Teaching and Learning at the University of Florida. She's also a Gallup-Certified strengths coach and a contributing author to the newly released book, What Education Becomes: Teaching and Learning in a Post-AI World. And when I say newly released, I mean today. That book was released today. So a huge congratulations to you and your team, Tawnya. Thank you so much for making time to talk to me on such a big day. Really excited to have you here and to learn more from you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here and so excited about the buzz about the book. It wasn't my idea. Patrick Dempsey has done an amazing job of bringing together a bunch of people who are really smart and giving us the opportunity to share some of our thoughts about how things are looking in the future. I'm really just so excited and I don't want to seem like I'm all in on AI because I recognize the challenges that we had ahead of us, but I'm also very hopeful and excited about the opportunities that they provide for us. And that's some of what I wrote about in the book.
Well, I have a ton of questions for you about it. I'm looking
Okay,
forward to
let's do
hearing
it.
your insights. Yeah, you have an extremely impressive background in leadership roles across multiple different institutions. So I do have questions about what made you pursue a career in higher education, but there's something in your post from today about the book release that I wanted to touch on before anything else, and it was the student Logan that you mentioned
Yes.
in the post. I thought
Yeah.
this was a really interesting sentiment to hear from a young student, and they shared a line that you posted about that said, "I don't want the answer, I want to understand." Why was that moment so important for you, and why does it end up being kind of at the heart of what you wrote about, as you mentioned?
Well, it's really a game changer when we think about the typical perception of what AI has been used for in education. There's been so much talk and focus on academic integrity. Academic integrity is so important, along with academic rigor, making sure that what we're asking students to do is valuable and that the students are being able to demonstrate that the things that they're doing are real evidence of learning. So that's kind of been the perception, is that AI is coming in and ruining all of that, is changing it. And what I really loved about being able to tell Logan's story was that this was an actual sentence that he said. He told me, I don't want to just see the answer. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do. I'm excited about it and I want to know, I want to understand. And so to me, that's the game changer because it's the ability for a student to recognize I need education. I want education. I don't want to make it easy. I don't want somebody to just do it for me. And they see the value in the education and work to make that um, part of what they do, their core.
I love hearing that because I think you're right. So many times you think the default perception of a student is to just take the path of least resistance and try and complete the assignment and potentially abuse the power of some of these tools. But I love hearing that because it really is a core human desire to understand how these things work and actually accomplish them and not just reach for the answer and be able to do some of these things. So I really liked seeing that. I'm excited to share that with this community. I think it's going to speak to kind of the mission of what we are trying to share in this podcast, which is messages of hope in higher education. And we often hear that from a leadership perspective, but kind of hearing that that's the sentiment shared from a student, I think is really, really refreshing to hear. So I'm glad you shared that. And it's interesting to kind of hear your take on what that meant to you. But to take a step back now from the book, I'm curious what led you to today when you're releasing and being part of this work. What made you want to pursue a career in higher ed, Tanya? Where did the journey start for you?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And, I don't think that there's any specific pivot point that said, today is the day I've decided I want to do this. But on the other hand, it has been something that's built up throughout my entire life. I mean, very early on, I had the same kind of concept of, I want to learn. I love learning. I loved reading. I loved everything about education. And I recognized how valuable it was to have access to it. So, you know, I think a lot of times we feel this sense of like education is everywhere because we're in it. But that's not actually true. There are a lot of people who don't have access to education, or if they have access to it, it seems unattainable to them for some reason or another, whether that's actual financial or whether that's some kind of judgment against themselves or whether that's time. There's a lot of different reasons why people don't feel that they can learn as much as they want to learn. And I was that way growing up. That was where I felt like I didn't have enough access to what I really wanted to do in education. And so throughout my educational career, as I started getting into my bachelor's degree and then my master's degree and my PhD, I started just like consuming as much education as I could, and I recognized the way in which it changed me, the way in which it enhanced what I was able to do in life, the people that I knew, the sense of confidence, the ability to try and do things that I'd always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it's like I'm able to give back to everyone else through whether that's in my roles in helping faculty to learn how to better serve their students, whether that's actually teaching students and helping to influence the ways in which they think and work, whether that's in just the operations of a university and how a university's purpose is to build education opportunities for people and to enhance their capabilities and their expertise. So it's kind of just like grown momentum over time. And really, when the launch of generative AI, I mean, I am aware because of my technical background in my dissertation and my schoolwork and things like that. I was aware of artificial intelligence for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I've always seen kind of the potential of it. But then the launch of generative AI was like putting it in the pockets of everyone, right? It
Yes.
handed it to the average person and said, here's a thing. Why don't you go try it and see what it can do for you? And it did different things for different people. And so as I started recognizing the power of that, it gave new energy to the things that I was wanting to accomplish because I recognized, for every faculty member who didn't have time or the pedagogical training to change their teaching, now they could. Or for every student who maybe needed to do, they needed more personalized learning experience, they could have it. So all these different ways we now started to open doors for people. And so it just reinvigorated and gave me new passion for what I'd been doing.
That's a really interesting background, and I know Inspire Higher Ed is something that you really launched last year, right? Kind of, yeah,
Yes,
at
yes.
the yeah, exciting sort of turning point of all this technology. Do I have that right there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'd been doing consulting, helping people with technology enhanced education, like how to do it for about 15 years prior to this. And so I had a lot of opportunities on the side of what the other work that I was doing to work with a variety of different institutions around the world. I had some really amazing opportunities to travel internationally and to present on online and blended education and how technology could enhance what happened in the classroom. And then, over the last almost 3 years now that we've been seeing generative I started getting more and more requests. Can I do this? Can you come and help me with this? So launching in January of last year and then really jumping full fledged into it over the summer this last year. I'm now like, I'm just as busy as I was before, if not more busy,
I
but
was
I'm
thinking you must
fully
be.
focused on this and I just love it.
That is an extremely busy sounding year and so many exciting changes, but it's also interesting to hear where the background comes from. To recognize that that personalized learning does really change the trajectory of a career. And when you do find someone who can answer some of those questions or help you think through what you're interested in learning, a good mentor can make such a big difference. But I also saw you mention this. Not everyone has access to that. Not everyone has a family member from the field or a friend you can reach out to or crosses paths with a professor who can make that kind of time for you individually. But suddenly there is a way
There
to
is.
provide, yeah, to provide that kind of personalized approach. And it kind of leads me into the next question I wanted to ask you about your chapter specifically, scarcity to abundance. What does that mean for you? What kind of things can we start doing now that this type of technology, like you said, is something everyone is getting more comfortable? It's not a novelty anymore. It's not a concept. It's something that's being tangibly integrated into so many different areas.
I think one of the things that is really critical to recognize is that we've kind of our educational system has kind of trained creativity, curiosity, and divergent thinking out of people. And it's kind of tried to, because of scale, there's There's always been this desire to make sure that people are educated, but there's a limit. There's only so many people that each individual instructor can reach. There's only so many classrooms. There's only so many resources that can be aligned to specifically helping each individual person learn. And so it was more around a coordination and a logistical problem as opposed to a desire to educate. And so we've kind of trained all the different types of questions that people might have. We've trained that out of people. And so, Logan, one of the things was, well, I have all these questions, but how many questions are too many questions to ask? Or I've taken up enough time of this instructor. I need to go figure this out on my own. Or I can only get scheduled with this tutor at this time and I need more than that. And so it's like this idea of there's not enough help. And when we start thinking about it from a 24/7 always available personal tutor, then we start to see the impact of what Bloom called the two sigma problem, which is the idea that individualized, personalized tutoring is two sigmas different or better than group instruction. And we know that. We've known that for a very long time. But how do we actually have it happen? And that's what I'm writing about is saying now that we don't have to worry about that, now it's a choice, right? It's no
Yeah.
longer we can't, it's do we choose to? And I think that choice is on both sides. So it's the choice of the learner and it's the choice of who's providing the learning to be able to say, as a learner, do I choose to take the easy route or do I choose to do productive struggle to learn? And from the institutional or the educational provider side, it is, do we remove caps? Do we allow people more flexibility? Do we change the structure of how we offer learning and credentials and all of these opportunities? So it now becomes a choice saying, everyone should be able to learn. We should open the doors wide. And then we have to also, at the same time, work on the mindset that we've kind of trained our culture to say, like, I'm not a math person. Well, that's the limitation you're placing on yourself.
So true.
And how do we help people to understand that it's the growth mindset? I don't know it yet. I don't understand it yet. I can understand it. I just need the right resources and the right help. And so helping to change that mindset is also part of this journey.
That's really exciting to hear. And again, I feel lucky that you've made time to speak with us because we are trying to find that message of hope in higher education when there is a lot of uncertainty about what the future looks like. And I think this is a message of hope for both staff and students to know that this can really reinvigorate, like you said, this
Absolutely.
natural curiosity for learning. And you see it in small ways.
Hmm.
Like you said, the group example might not appeal to everyone in a math class. Not everyone's going to resonate with you're buying this many apples minus this many oranges. What does it mean? As soon as you put it into a sports analogy for one person or a medical analogy for another, the same concept clicks differently. And I've seen it. I was a tutor at one point as well. And you see it suddenly make sense for someone just because of such a small personalized change. And this has obviously degrees of magnitude more potential. So it's exciting to hear. And what I'm curious to hear from you next, Tanya, is having been in so many different leadership roles across multiple different institutions, what would you recommend leadership do to start helping their institutions embrace this kind of messaging? Because I still see a little bit of resistance, a little bit of worry around how the technology is going to be used. Do you have thoughts that or strategies you've kind of seen starting to help make teams more comfortable with the abilities they now have?
So one thing I think is important to recognize is that there are valid reasons for concern. We have examples where we've seen that AI has done some very detrimental things and has convinced people to do some really harmful things.
Fair
And
enough.
we need to recognize that those are valid concerns and we need to address those concerns. So we can't just run blindly into the future without recognizing that we need some guardrails and we need some protections. On the same vein, we also need to not let those concerns and those guardrails and those conversations hamper us or paralyze us from forward action. And so, one of the things that I think is really critical is, first of all, that leaders need to be doing the things that they want others to do. They need to model the behavior that they want to see. And I don't mean not just like the provost and the president and the chancellor and the dean needing to model. They do, but then every level of leadership. So an instructor in a classroom, if they want their students to follow certain protocols or use critical thinking, they need to model that to their students to help them to understand. When you get results from AI, here's what you need to do to verify that this is valid information, and here's what you need to do to make sure that it's your voice that's being said and that you understand and know this information, not just, spitting something out like you're, a parrot. And so I think it's critical that we recognize the importance of modeling. And then we also need to have an environment in which we embrace failure. And that doesn't mean that we want to, crash and burn. It means that we need to recognize that there's that productive struggle of learning that is happening all around us, and that it's okay to not have it all figured out yet. And that the more we talk with each other and share with each other, this is what I tried, here's what happened. It didn't work the way I wanted it to, and so I tried this. I tried that too, and it worked this way for me, and it didn't work this way for me. So having those conversations and being open and accepting to the idea that we need to try things, we need to fail, and we need to learn from those failures and then make different choices the next time. So that culture piece of, it's around the growth mindset again, right? It's, I
Yeah.
haven't figured it out yet. I'm working on it, and that we're working on it together. So I think those are two really critical pieces, is the leaders actually doing it themselves and then accepting growth and failure as part of the natural learning process. Beyond that, I think we need to have the conversations about where should the guardrails be, how can we set them up, when is it appropriate to not use AI, and when is it appropriate to use AI, and then when we use it, how do we use it? All of those are important conversations to have, but they shouldn't be stopping us from doing any forward movement while we have those conversations.
I think that makes a ton of sense, Tanya, and that starts to feel like a tangible approach. And I think it's something that students appreciate as well. I've started to hear more institutions embrace that mentality that we are going to try something. We are going to inform students we're trying something. We're not going to ask them to do something we're not willing to do ourselves. And we're going to keep them in the loop on what's working and what needs to be adjusted. And so far, it seems like, again, students appreciate knowing what's happening and being included in the development of some of these new approaches. And there's no real way around it because it's new for everyone. So I think that makes a lot of sense to give staff that sense of support as they try to figure out some of these new tools and approaches. And it's exciting too, because we're still seeing new programming developed and completely new strategies and ideas. One I heard of recently was, instead of having students, just write about an advertising project, for example, they were asked to come up with the campaign, generate the images, generate much more than they would have been able to do without this. So the scope of what they were expected to do increased. And I thought, hey, that's a great way to now say, hey, you have more, you're able to do, like, let's do more with that ability.
Well, it goes beyond just the scope of the project. Yes, we can give them more things to do and more advanced things to do, more comprehensive activities and things like that. But we can also make it both authentic to, this is what you're going to experience when you get outside of my classroom, whether that's the next class or the next job or whatever it is, that this is going to be a sense of, I'm doing something in the classroom that's going to impact me outside of the classroom. So I think that's the first piece, is just recognizing we can make it more authentic. But then we can also make it personalized, and I don't mean like even a path that you choose your own A or B option, but it's a recognition of what you've got behind you, what experience and background you have, and a recognition of where you want to go in the future. So that may be your interests, it may be your goals, but it may also be just like you said earlier, I prefer learning about this in a sports analogy, or I prefer learning about this in a baking analogy, or whatever it is. It's recognizing that you as an individual are a unique person, and that your learning is going to be best impacted through a unique experience.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thought because so many of these core concepts seem unimportant when they're not put in your context. But you're right. Someone might not consider themselves a math person, be extremely interested in cooking, only to later realize how much math is involved in cooking. It just was
That's
never
right.
put into that context. So
That's right.
that's a really interesting thought to kind of keep what that person's core interest is in mind and build the skills they're learning around their ambition. I think that's really interesting. And like you said, not something that's been able to be done at scale because
That's
how do
right.
you keep all these different ambitions in mind until, a time like now? Which is, a question I also want to squeeze in with the time I have for you here. Are there any examples that come to mind of where this work is being done well, even in its early stage? I know you've had a chance to, as you said, work around the world, across 6 continents, slowly building up, um, insights and examples from around the world. Do any jump to mind as ones we can
Well,
learn from?
not to plug another self promotion or anything, but
Please do.
I do have a report that I put out in January. There'll be another version of the report out in July, and it looks at 48 different business schools around the world and their practices in terms of AI in business education and how their practices align with their university practices. And so initiatives that are happening at the university and how they impact the college, and then individual examples of courses and curriculum changes and tools and faculty development, pedagogical changes, all of that. So it's a really comprehensive report, and I'd be happy to share with you a link to be for your listeners to be able to request the report. But that
Yes.
is a very good collection of a set of stories from these different business schools. And the report, basically what it tries to do is to put those experiences into some themes, and then from those themes give implications to leadership of the things that we could be doing to move forward.
And I definitely saw that. I'm gonna post a link in the description of this for those,
Perfect.
curious to learn more. That's your January 2026 AI and Business Education report, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, absolutely, we'll link to that here. It's something I wanna check out as well, so thank you for mentioning it. We'll make sure to make it easy to get access to that. I know I don't have a ton more of your time, Tanya. I'm sure there's a lot of exciting things you have to do today. Maybe one of the last questions I wanna ask you is there something you're hoping to see come out of this next phase of development, as this technology becomes more integrated and we get a better sense of how to utilize it and work it into the goals of both institutions and students. Is there something you're hoping to see happen as you think of the future here?
Absolutely. I have a great example of a faculty member I was just recently talking to, and she said, I've been doing this for a long time. She had years of experience out in industry before she came and started teaching. And she said, I was kind of feeling like I'd maybe used up my usefulness, that other people would be better to come in and, take my place. But then I started experimenting with generative AI and I started recognizing the value of what I could do with my students, and it's reinvigorated me to teaching. And she's trying some really amazing things in her classroom, and she's just really fundamentally transforming what she's doing with her class. And I think that would be my hope is that every person would start to recognize the potential for what these tools can do and to start experimenting with it and start having that feeling of, wow, this is a new thing. This is something cool. This is something that the class I'd always wanted to teach. Now I can do it. And to start recognizing from an educator's perspective. And then that excitement then feeds off into their students, and their students start to recognize, I could just take it the easy way, but I really want to understand. I really want to learn. So don't just give me the answer. Help me understand it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Tanya, for sharing these insights. I'm excited to share the work in this book, in this anthology here, with the community. I think it's extremely timely. And again, I truly think this is a message of hope from a different perspective than I've had the chance to hear before. So that's exciting in itself. We have more educators and students listening into this than ever. And so, for those who are listening, is there a way for them to reach out to you directly if they have questions or want to learn more about the work you are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn's probably the best place to get me. So just jump on LinkedIn and connect with me. Alternatively, they can email me directly, and it's just tawnya@inspirehighered.com.
Awesome. Congratulations again on all the success
Thank
and
you.
the release today. And hopefully, we'll have you back on in the future to hear about
I'd love to.
what's happened as we continue seeing this work roll out and people start to get a chance to read some of the content in the book here. If you'll come back, we would be happy to have you.
I'd love to.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for your time, Tanya.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the great conversation.